Welcome to Bite Size PL, professional learning you can consume during lunch, or on a dog walk, or while riding a bike. Could be a gravel bike, could be a mountain bike, could be a road bike, all different kinds of bikes. Our goal is to provide meaningful, engaging, and brief conversations for educators. I'm Jared, and my co-host today is Kate.
Hello, Jared.
Hello, Kate. We have a lot of guests today. Some of the first grade team from Sunburst Elementary. We have Kellie Norton, Deana Flinders, and Nikole Jennings with us today.
We're so excited. Thank you guys so much for sharing your time with us. This is awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have come to talk to you about teaming and strong PLCs. And you all clearly emulate a team that is working together for all students. So what elements do you think contribute to making a highly functioning team?
I think you all have to be in it together. You have to all be giving it your all. When you're contributing, you know other people are contributing as much as you are, then it makes it easier to kind of give it your all when you know that's what everyone's doing.
Knowing your strengths and weaknesses is a good one too, and being willing to share those, which isn't always easy. But it's good because then everyone else knows, like, oh, hey, we can help you with this a little bit. Like, have you tried this? Which is nice.
And I think also like you're invested in like all of the students. You're just not thinking about your students in your class. You want the whole, we're a team. You want our whole first grade, we want them all to succeed, and just not my kids, but they're our kids.
Well, you guys obviously emulate that, and we were able to watch some of this, like the outcomes of teaming in action with these groups and these rotations, and it's pretty amazing how seamless we get first graders into different stations and classrooms. And I'm like, I can't even get seniors to do this, which is pretty incredible. And it does speak to the preparation that you guys are doing as a PLC. So can you speak to kind of specifics while still applying to all teaming? How do you plan together to kind of manage that? If you are seeing it as all of your students and you want them to all be successful, but you really need tight teaming to make that successful, what does that look like? And how do you manage that time and behavior of kids and rotations?
So I think it starts with CFAs. We do common formative assessments as a grade level. We do them about every 3 weeks, but then we kind of do a little mini CFA. If there's a skill we're working on, then we check that at the end of the week to see where they're at. And so that gives us like a really clear picture of where our students are. Then we can group them according to what students we need to come out to the hall with us or need those intervention groups and what skill exactly they're working on. So we can see that I may have 2 students, Deana may have 1, and Kellie may have 3 that are working on long vowel teams. And then we're able to group those students together and kind of break down the individual needs of those kids to combine them into groups that make the most sense. And then once we've got those groups kind of taken care of, then we kind of work to see what other centers or activities they can be working on in the classroom.
Even during like our groups that we do during the day, like right after we're done with groups, we usually meet and I'm like, this wasn't a good pairing. We need to change this up. So sometimes our groups even change from day to day. Yeah. Not a lot because then it kind of messes with the group situation. But we all are like, oh, hey, let's change this. This person would be better with this person than we all. And we do this like in our recesses all the time. And then we really plan on Fridays.
It helps that our recess comes right at the end of our groups.
It really does.
So it's like a quick minute. But then we have like our formal PLCs every Friday that we're discussing like
those CFAs
and looking at our data. And so those are more like the informal, but then we're kind of drilling down the data every week.
It sounds like, it's almost like you rely both on informal and the formal, like teaming. Informal being like poking your head in. Okay, so I just had this thought, which I think requires a lot of vulnerability. Can you speak to how that kind of functions in this PLC? How you have to, as a teacher, kind of be ready to be like, oh yeah, so that didn't work for me. Like what help or, looking at data, sharing data, that kind of thing.
I do feel like we do that a lot. to be perfectly honest.
Like you're good
Like,
at being vulnerable.
We're good at being vulnerable with each other because we feel so comfortable just saying the things like, hey, this isn't working for me. Like something's missing.
I think as a teacher, you have to take a step back and realize that it's not about your teaching necessarily. It's about the student understanding what you're saying. And so it doesn't mean that you're a bad teacher because that student didn't understand what you were trying to teach. It just means that you maybe need a different approach to teaching it. You need to try something different, which is why we love like switching up our groups or like switching which teacher. Maybe the kids stay the same, but they get a new teacher in a group, because sometimes I'll just be like, hey, Bueller, Norton, like they didn't understand long vowels coming from me. Like that did not go over well. So like, how do you have a suggestion of how to do it? Or why don't you try taking these kids and see if they get it better from you, from what you're saying?
I would say we strategically try and place them with each teacher so that they get at least 2 different teachers during the week on the same thing. And usually without their homeroom teacher, which just adds in another like, how do we do this rotation to make it work? So there's
It's a lot of
really
planning.
getting 3 teachers, not just 1, which is good. It's really good for them. Letting go of, I think we talked about this, letting go of your ego kind of a thing.
You have to hand it over to the students. You really do, which is hard when they're 6 and 7 years old. But I think it goes back to like a lot of practice, because at the beginning of the year, it wasn't such a well-oiled machine. It takes a minute to train the students on what it looks like when they're in the classroom, what it looks like when they're in the hall, on a group with us, or one-on-one. And I think that's part of what makes it so successful. And it seems like a lot of planning, but once you've done the work beforehand, it's easy to maintain, I guess.
Plugging into that. This is the procedure. We just change who's going where and what's happening.
And I think like once, we start, I mean, like sometimes it's like every week we're switching groups up, and it like sometimes those kids, once they're in, they've been taught that they don't miss a beat. It's just like, oh, hey, you're not going out with the first group anymore. You're going with the next group. And it's just like a reminder, a few days, and they've got it.
One thing I really like about that is the variety, just the nature of all this constant change. Like as a student, like you lose your drive real quick. So just this constant, like, I'm going to hear it from Miss Norton, then I'm going to go to Miss Flinders, and they're just getting not only like different opportunities for repetition, but hearing different voices and just so many great things there.
Yeah. So you guys talked about that powerful thing that happens when you're reviewing data and you're understanding where students are and adjusting to that. Have you noticed like how your collaborative PLC and the effective things that you're doing affect the outcomes for students? Like, do you start to see, like, does that feed itself, I guess, is, can you kind of explain how student outcomes feeds your team in a way to make it stronger or more effective?
We've noticed a big increase in like scores in general of where our students are, specifically this year as opposed to other years. I mean, we've kind of all done a similar style of teaching or interventions with other groups of people that may or may not have been as effective. But I think all of us this year are like, wow, these kids are really getting it. We're just a little shocked by how well they're doing. And I think it just speaks to like the input from all of us and the work that it is, that it's working really well, that the students are getting it, and that we're seeing those students who aren't getting it, and we're able to kind of easily and quickly identify those who might need like an intervention specifically to maybe look at a resource referral or something like that. We've been able to pretty clearly see like, okay, we've been doing these groups for a really long time, and we have 2 ELL students who are both started at the same level, and now one of them is just taking off and the other one is not. And it makes it pretty clear to us. And I think that's one of the benefits of doing it, is that you can kind of quickly identify students whose needs maybe aren't being met based on what like the progress of everyone else is making in that group.
And that's the entire function of a PLC, right? Like if the data isn't improving, then you're changing, and then until the data improves. And so theoretically it always is, which is great.
Well, and throughout the year, like at the beginning of the year, our groups that we pull out are like, we have like a lot, a lot of kids. And it's cool to like, as it goes on and we keep working with them and stuff, then we start saying, hey, we don't think that they need to be in. What are you seeing in class? Do you feel that way too, And so then we're like kicking kids out because we feel like, we're seeing the progress that they're making. And so like, now when you guys came today to film, the groups were like that we were working with were more smaller and one-on-one, but at the beginning it's not that way.
At the beginning we have about 6 students per group for several that they'll go to me for one intervention and then they'll go to someone else for another. So they're getting multiple different interventions on different topics, but then as they progress, then we kind of slim it down.
All right, well, James Clear, he's the author of Atomic Habits, says, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So what do you have in place that allows your system to run at a high level for you to reach your goals?
I think one of the biggest keys, we were kind of talking about this, is that we each do it a little differently. Like it doesn't take each teacher's personality out of or style of teaching out of the way we do it, because each classroom essentially has blended learning going on in there where students have, we call them choice boards or menus that each student is doing while they're in class, and they know what their expectation is. But all of our menus look slightly different based on the needs of our class. And I think that's one thing that's really important, is that you feel like you're able to maintain your teacher identity and philosophy. We've each kind of have a common goal, but we've made it our own a little bit. So our menus look different. Our expectations are different. Some of us have like a timer on set rotations that the kids in the classroom will rotate at a set amount of time, and others it's like you get to choose whatever activity you want, you time yourself. So it's very fluid based on teacher needs and philosophies in their own classrooms.
Well, I really like that the system allows you to still be yourself. You don't have to give up who you are, your style and everything to make this work. You still get to be, and who you are really, and your personality, your style, all that gets to still be there.
It's enough of the same procedure that we can work together, but then we still have our own personal identities within our classrooms.
It's like building a house. You have a good foundation, and then each of us has our own rooms and we can decorate it
I like that.
however you want, kind of a thing. Do you know what I mean?
We have our own like house plan.
Yeah.
But the foundation is there.
Yeah.
Solid.
Like I'm okay having a couple of dishes in the sink when people come over. Deana probably doesn't.
She's like, yep, that's 100% true, actually.
But it sounds like, from what you are describing, your system is airtight, like the structure is airtight. Like, and that doesn't mean, right? That doesn't mean there's not room for you, but as far as like, we look at the data.
Yes.
Like if kids aren't meeting the goal, like we know exactly where to put them. We're not guessing.
No.
We're using data that we see in class, data that we get on assessments, conversations that we've had. That system is tight.
Well, because part of your system is you have your common formative assessment that I'm sure, have worked hard to get it to be a clear measurement. And so you know what it means. It's not just some arbitrary number, like it has a meaning, and then you can place kids where they need to go. But then you also have the informal part that you've already talked about, where you can make fluid changes on the go, where you notice things like that.
The common informal assessments make it so we have an easy, clear goal of what we're all working towards. So we know what the ending goal looks like. We're all working on the same page to get students to that end target.
I am sure we've all been part of PLCs that were harder to be a part of. And it sounds like you guys are part of a PLC right now where you're like, this feels like we're thriving and the way it's supposed to work is working. What advice do you have for teachers looking to improve their own PLCs? Like if they could start with one thing, what would that value added thing be where you're like, oh, if teams could just do this, start here, they would start to see maybe a shift in student learning?
I go with that mindset. It's our kids. It's not like my class against, Nikole's class or my class against Kellie's class. It's we're working together for a common goal and to help get our students where they the best, place that they can be, and let's work together to do that. This is our job. We want to get these kids to where they need to be. Let's work together and do this.
I also think like our human nature is we don't like to be uncomfortable. And sometimes we get in our own way of like trying new things. Like, this is just too much. I don't want to think about it. But if you actually like put in the extra hard work, which every teacher does
already into something.
Like, be comfortable being uncomfortable and be okay failing at things. And most of us are okay, but you get to that point where you're like, I don't have enough room for this right now. That's sometimes okay, just to take the step forward and try it, because the worst thing that's going to happen is you will stay the same.
And maybe someone who's willing to be vulnerable first, their team will be like, oh, they were willing to be uncomfortable and share their data and open up, and maybe I'll be willing to be uncomfortable and share that. I love it.
I would say communication.
Yeah.
It's all about just being a person and talking to each other about the stuff.
Yeah, I think also just taking a small step. Like, you don't have to maybe get 2 teachers to share kids first. Like, get part of your team, split the team in half, and kind of 2 of you share and another 2 of you share, or like take a small step towards that. You don't have to like, we have to meet this target or we're failing as a team. Like, if we're not sharing as a whole grade level, we'll just kind of, or maybe like be willing to take other kids from other classes. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I'm going to be teaching a reteach math group about combinations to 10. Do you have any kids you want to grab? I've got 2. Is there any? And maybe just like being willing to take someone else's students who are struggling might make someone else willing to do the same back for you.
I like the thought, going back to everything we've said, that we have the same house. Mm-hmm. So we've got like the first grade house, we've got individual rooms, but they're not competing. No. And the kids are welcome in any of the rooms. Yeah. They can move fluidly between there, but you're here to get them to the next level, right? You're here to get them to, in this case, the second grade. Yeah. And so I think that works really well with this. So what has like been one of the biggest benefits of working like as a highly functioning team?
I feel like I don't have to do it all, because when I'm by myself, then I've got the beginning of the year. First grade's very, very drastically different of how kids come in. So you've got a group of kids that maybe knows 5 letter names and sounds. And then you've got everything between that, kids that are blending, kids that are just beginning to read, and then reading fluently at second grade level text. So as a teacher, then I have to meet the needs of all of those kids by myself, which is really intimidating. But if I'm taking a group that's working on letter names and sounds, and I have all the kids that are working on letter names and sounds, then I'm teaching the same letter name and sound group that I'm preparing maybe 3 times. So instead of teaching 3 separate lessons I have to plan and prepare for, I'm teaching 1 lesson 3 times to 3 separate groups of kids, which saves time planning and preparing, and
sanity.
Yeah, it saves your sanity, not having to feel like you are doing it all. Yeah,
because you've got a huge brain trust, a wonderful team. I love that.
And it's fun when you all come out. It really is fun for me when we all come out and we're like, what do you got for this? Oh, I got this. And we kind of all throw it out on the table and be like, ooh, I like that. Ooh, I'm going to do this, but a little bit different. Like, how do you do this? It's just good to collectively collaborate in a good way. That's awesome. That's a good feeling.
All right. Well, we appreciate you so much for being here with us. And as always, we'd like to thank our producer, Tom, for making us sound so good. And this season, we're putting the video of the podcast on YouTube. You can continue listening on your favorite podcast app, and also check out the video on our YouTube channel. Check the show notes for that link. And thanks for joining us. Please like and subscribe and share the podcast with others. See you at school.